Woody Page, Israel Gutierrez, Frank Isola, Jackie McMahon. Where have you been all my life today? Whether you're just doing it or just not doing it, whatever you do, don't cut your socks, all right? We're not savages here. Come on.
Wow.
Also, when you have the biggest win of your life, but you got that fantasy draft coming up, you got to have priorities here, people.
7 o'clock in the morning fantasy draft. Second pick. I don't know whether to go Gurley or Le'Veon Bell.
Answer the question, man. Give it to him.
Gurley, it's too easy.
Gurley,
David Johnson, number one.
He's got the second pick. He actually doesn't have
It's Around the Horn, the show of competitive banter. Here's Tony Reali.
Well, here's something that might play into that. It's 4 days before Week 1 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Le'Veon Bell still hasn't reported, still hasn't signed his franchise tender. We're going to start there. I don't want to alarm anybody whose fantasy draft is in 15 minutes, John Millman included, but what is going on in Pittsburgh? Frank Isola, start us off. Are we at a point now where you doubt Bell will be game ready Week 1?
Well, if you go back to last season, the same thing happened. He had 10 carries, only 32 yards, and there's been 3 other occasions where he didn't even play in the season opener. But I think when you look at the Steelers, you look on Le'Veon Bell, you're looking at the big picture here, and that's a dangerous weapon to have. He's holding out, hoping to get paid the way that Khalil Mack got paid, Aaron Donald got paid. But when you're running back, it's a little bit different situation. I'm not worried about Week 1. I'm worried about him for the rest of the season.
Jackie Mack, you have any concerns?
Oh, of course I do. You're about to start your season, and one of your best weapons isn't there. And I know what he did last year. I know he walked in and it all worked out. But look a little closer. In September, he averaged 60 yards a game last year, Tony. By the end of the season, he was averaging over 90 yards a game. That's a pretty big difference. I'd like that 90 yards a game from game 1 through 16. I don't want to have to wait till October to get it. Yeah. So if I'm the Steelers, I'm not only concerned, I'm annoyed.
Yeah. Irked, it seems like. How about you, Woody Page?
I like that word.
Well, Jackie, you could start at running back when the Pittsburgh Steelers open the season because they're playing the Cleveland Browns. So I don't think, and the coach of that team has just indicated that he's not concerned. He knows what Bell can do. So you guys, I think, are overreacting. He will be there. They'll get it worked out. Even if he's not in great shape, Frank, to play in the first game, they're going to need him for a longer stretch than just one game against Cleveland. So I think we all need to back off and realize that this has happened before. As Frank's pointed out, he's either been injured in opening games or
suspended.
He wasn't very good in opening games or suspended. Yeah. Yes. So twice. I don't think it's an issue. It's just not panic time in Pittsburgh.
And Israel Gutierrez.
No, I don't think it's an overreaction either for the short term or the long term. If you look at it in the short term, it happened last year, but that means this year it would have to happen exactly the same or slightly better for Steelers and the Steelers fans for them to be happy. It could end up worse. He could go out there and pull a hamstring on the first play. You never really know. And then when you talk about this particular season, well, the Steelers have had a history of underachieving with all this talent that they have. Maybe once they'd like to get it rolling early on and not have all these problems to deal with, and then by the end they're not underachieving anymore. And if you want to talk about the long term, well, it doesn't look like the Steelers and Le'Veon Bell's relationship is getting any better. So for the long term, will they have Le'Veon Bell for the rest of his prime on that team? We don't know. So I think there's plenty of reasons to be concerned.
All right, guys, Sully, one back in. You want to address that?
And I think, the Steelers are a win-now team with that quarterback, that wide receiver, and Le'Veon Bell's a big part of it. I think that's part of his leverage, thinking you guys need me because the window for Ben Roethlisberger is pretty short. But 5 years ago, he started the season. He rushed for over 100 yards. But, Jackie, you talk about offenses. It seems like the first couple of weeks of an NFL season, every offense kind of sputters a little bit. It takes them a little bit of time to get their rhythm going.
Just because,
I did find it a little amusing, though, that Mike Tomlin's tried to sell us on James Conner like he's even close to Le'Veon Bell. And no disrespect to Conner. I know he's a good young running back.
Sounds like you're disrespecting Conner, though, there, Jackie. Having said that, whenever you invite that,
there's great and there's greatest, right?
Really. I know. We all agree. Le'Veon Bell, as we said, if you're fantasy drafting tonight, or you pause on Le'Veon Bell because you're going to be giving away the first week of the season, potentially, second week? No, Woody Page, there is no pause button in Woody Page's world. No.
$14.35 million. He's going to show up. He's not going to eat $800,000.
Well, then let that be the last word. We'll move on. Let's talk some college now. Say it with me. College! Winners and losers, but first, here's Nick Saban.
All right, so why do you continually try to get me to say something that doesn't respect one of them? I'm not going to, so quit asking.
That, of course, was after the game Saturday. The apology is issued since then to Maria Taylor. who was interviewing him, and the fact that it all came after a game where Tua looked like he did, Hurts looked like he did, and it's obvious Tua would be the starter going forward, which is now the case, as Saban has announced that. What's the most noteworthy thing in all of that, Jackie Mack?
So for me, it was Tua. He was really, really good. Threw for 2 touchdowns, rushed for another one. They have a quarterback that's not only really, really good, but can take them all the way to the national championship. And I'm sure we're going to hear about Jalen Hurts, and he'll probably make appearances along the way. I think it's pretty clear who their number one quarterback is. In terms of the apology, I didn't like the way he handled himself after the game. He said afterwards there were things that happened at the end of the game. We've all been in the heat of the moment, blah, 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 blah. I do like that he apologized, though, and I know some people think, oh, that was too little too late. Nick Saban doesn't do anything unless he wants to do it. So he must have decided, you know what, I owe Maria Taylor an apology, and it's private, and I'm going to do it. So I didn't mind that, actually. I liked it.
Paige, how about you?
Tony, you were off vacationing last week. I was doing 3 shows, and we talked about this subject of the 2 quarterbacks 3 different times. So would you stop asking me about it? I don't want to talk about it anymore. I just think that his situation, that was Nick Saban being his usual self in terms of being Greg Popovich and others, Bill
Belichick,
Belichick, yes, right. And I'm tired of talking about that. Just move on.
I get it, but understandably, okay, you're admitting that this is shtick from Nick Saban, or it's shtick in the way that it is at least for Belichick and Popovich. Israel, if it's shtick, does he have to explain it, or did he answer it incorrectly to begin with and owed an apology?
I think we learned that it wasn't shtick because he apologized. If it was part of his routine, he would have just kept going with it. The thing that's kind of infuriating about it is he did essentially a great job of not disrespecting either player, all the build up to it. And even though we kind of knew it had to be Tua, we've seen a lot of Jalen. Tua won them a national championship. He still made it seem like they were both in the mix. And yet after the game, when it should be good feelings and happiness, here he is going after Maria Taylor for asking a perfectly legitimate question when all he could have done was given the highlights, the positive of both players during the game, and that would have answered her question and wouldn't have upset anybody. It was an immature response from him. That's why we got the apology.
Good feelings after the game from Nick Saban. Are you familiar with Mr. Saban there, Israel? I mean, he's screaming at players who get penalties when they're up 35-0. Frank Isola, how about you?
He answered the question as if he really didn't listen to what the question was, because she didn't disrespect either guy. She basically said, what did you think about both of them? So it's almost like he had an answer ready to go, regardless of what the question was going to be. That part of it was absurd, and I think we saw something from Doug Peterson last week in Philadelphia. We've seen this with Greg Popovich, Bill Belichick. I guess when you win, you feel you can kind of bully the media. But guess what, guys? There are certain times where we have to ask obvious questions, especially about the quarterback. And guess, you're speaking to your fans. Maria Taylor, the guys in Philadelphia, they're doing the right thing. They're asking the questions that the fans want answered.
Mm-hmm. Seeing Alabama look like that and get quarterback play like they did from Tua, is it possible they're the big winner of the weekend in a game you already knew they were going to win? But then, of course, Ohio State without Urban Meyer, 77 points, and Notre Dame's win over Michigan and Auburn and Virginia Tech coming with big wins. Who was the big winner of the weekend, Frank?
Well, there's a lot. I think, obviously, Virginia Tech, as you're seeing right here. I'll tell you what, and I don't want to be the homer, but the University of Maryland, everything that they've gone through with their coach being put on administrative leave and beating the University of Texas. Here's Texas, Tom Herman. They're supposed to be this big-time program. Second year in a row, they lose to Maryland on Labor Day weekend. That's pretty big.
Jack, do you have a big winner of the weekend?
Frank, where'd you go to college?
He went to Maryland. He acknowledged that from the start.
Okay.
We're not going to deduct for that.
I think it's Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech went into Florida State and just made mincemeat out of them. It's got to be Virginia Tech.
Mm-hmm. Woody Page?
Akron. Akron showed up in Nebraska, got $1.17 million, remains undefeated. We're not beat up.
Yeah, we'll see if they get that money, Woody. You're talking about the game that was delayed, postponed to Sunday, then they didn't play it.
The game started. Once the game started, you played a game, so you get the money.
There may be some fine print there, maybe about the same size of your chalkboard behind you. How about you, Gutierrez, winner of the weekend?
Oh, I'm going bigger picture. I'm calling it the SEC as the biggest winner. You had Alabama looking like that. You had Auburn beating Washington. You had LSU beating Miami. And to go frank, I'm not wanting to be a homer here, but you had the Gators beating Charleston Southern. So
that's
all
right.
Great,
SEC
great
West
weekend.
is undefeated. We understand.
Except for Tennessee.
Can we talk a little bit more maybe about the bigger losers of the weekend? You can give me more on that, because Michigan, every year it feels like we're doing this. Texas, as you said, Frank, every year we are doing this. Miami, Florida State, or if you just want to focus on the coaches like Harbaugh, Herman, and Willie Taggart and how he started his era. They're wearing it right now. Izzy, who deserves to be dragged most? Who's the biggest loser of the weekend?
I think it's Jim Harbaugh, but I'm going to let others go after him because I think on the heels of Jim Harbaugh is Mark Richt and Miami. I know it hasn't been as long of a tenure here, but this was a build-up year. They had they built a season last year off of wins off Virginia Tech and Notre Dame, and the last four losses have been awful. And you get that game on national television, your first win of the season, it kind of deflates the rest of the season. That's a bad loss for you.
The man says this with Miami written all over the background. Easy. All right, how about you, Frank Isola?
I think Florida State's loss at home is shocking. To score that few points, in a nationally televised game, you're supposed to be a big-time program. But how about the situation in Miami with Braylon Edwards? A former big-time receiver there gets suspended by the Big Ten Network at Michigan and goes off on the players and the coaching staff. I looked it up. Braylon Edwards, his 4 years at Michigan, they lost their first road game all 4 years, and they lost to Notre Dame twice on the road in his 4 years there. He's talking like an insane alum who's irrational, not like
right. He called the team trash. But, can we go a little bit deeper in that game if we can? Michigan's offense, which has been an enigma, a riddle, a mystery for the last 3 years, and then Shea Patterson comes here, Jackie Mack. And what did you see from Michigan, and what are you seeing from Jim Harbaugh maybe in his last season and a half?
Well, that's the thing. Remember, Harbaugh went there, I think he was 17-3 out of the gate, and we're like, okay, he's going to win them a national championship. He's the coach we thought he was, one of the greatest coaches of all time. And now he's, over the last 3.5 seasons, he's a 500 coach. And the one thing about Harbaugh, he's always great with quarterbacks. And Shea Patterson, did he inspire a whole bunch of confidence in you? He really didn't in me. So it's just vexing to me why Harbaugh isn't better, why his choice of quarterbacks aren't better. Their defense is pretty good. Don Brown, that was but it's just, why hasn't he taken the leap? We all thought he was
lost on the road to a good team. I mean, they didn't lose at home.
Oh, so now you're willing to call Notre Dame a good team, which is another question we have every year.
Frank, here's the thing, though. Frank, here's the thing. They've lost 17 road games to teams that are in the top 25, 8 teams. 17 straight. Yeah. You don't expect that from Harbaugh. You expect more.
Woody Page, you would say so.
Yeah, I think Washington was the biggest loser. The Huskies had a chance to run the table in a weaker Pac-12 this year, and I think losing to Auburn is going to hurt them. But in regard to Harbaugh, if you think about it, he's never any good. He can't win against teams that are in the AP poll. And think about the losses he's had at the end of games. All the circumstances that happened. I think it's a real problem there, but they're going to give him a lot more time because they love him. He needs to stop going to Italy and to Florida and concentrate on what's going on.
He needs to stop going to South Bend.
You say they're going to give him a lot more time because they can't give him a lot more money. He's already being paid like he's Nick Saban, and the record isn't there. Taking a break right here. Buy or sell on the other side. Woody Page, 14. Gutierrez, 10. Isola, 19. McMullen, 20.
I'm LSU.
Like 14's any good?
Big winner.
I'm a squeaky toy, and I've got one job, getting chomped on by this little ankle sniffer. So pardon me for feeling inept compared to Geico, who does so much more. Like while I'm getting slobbered on, Geico is creating cool technology like their mobile app, which lets people pay their bills or file a claim. Plus, Geico is the fastest growing auto insurer for the last 10 years. Is it too much for me to ask for one more feature? Fast and friendly claim service like Geico, maybe? Oh, great. I'm getting buried again.
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more. Buy or sell.
It's been 3 days since the Raiders traded Khalil Mack. I'm still looking for somebody who thinks the trade makes sense. Anybody here in this panel?
No.
Okay, Israel, we'll get to that in a second. Here's John Gruden explaining.
Look, we're going to be second guessed until the cows come home on this. I understand that. Bottom line is we did do our due diligence. There was a standoff, and he got a great contract from the Bears.
Let me tell you something, man. I love the smell of cows, okay? And they come home. Woody Page, anything he said right there convince you they have a plan?
No, they're not coming home. The cows aren't coming. The Raiders aren't coming back to their home in another year or two. It's a situation where I didn't believe anything he said. Las Vegas didn't either, even though that's going to be their new home. They went from 20-1 odds for the Super Bowl to 40-1. I just think that one of the things they've done here is they have helped the Bears become a better team, which means those draft choices are not going to be worth as much as they would have been.
Good point. Israel Gutierrez, you alluded that you like this. You kind of, what do you like about it?
Well, 20 to 1 odds, first of all, were not that great. This was not a Super Bowl-ready team. So what the Raiders did was they secured their future, which, by the way, is going to be in Vegas. So whether or not those picks are number 1 through 10 or somewhere in the middle, they're going to add value or add talent to this franchise, to this team. And 2 or 3 years from now, they could look loaded like the Seahawks from a few years ago. And then you're going to be saying, hey, Khalil Mack might be doing great things in Chicago, but here this team did the right thing.
Okay. Did John Gruden or Israel Gutierrez convince you the Raiders have a plan here, Frank Isola?
Well, they're in the business of accumulating assets, and I think they set the bar and said, if we can get 2 first-round picks and we don't want to pay him the money, we'll do it. Lo and behold, that's the offer they got. But you know what? Whoever you draft, is he going to be as good as Khalil Mack is down the road? Here's a guy that's durable, and the last 4 years, 40.5 sacks, in a league where defense still matters? I don't know about that.
Jackie Mack.
I'm with Frank on this one. He's a transformative player. You got to think twice before you move those kind of guys along on either side of the ball. Thought it was interesting that Aaron Donald, they waited to see how much money he got. Why not just sign Mack beforehand and let you start the market? So it was clear to me they never had any intention of paying him.
Frank, you said they're in the accumulating assets business. They could also be in the communication business. They could talk to Khalil Mack before. Do you believe that Gruden and Mack never talked to each other?
I find that a little hard to believe. And the fact that it's his first year there, I think they would do anything that he wanted them to do. So if he wanted Mack, he would be on the team.
We'll move on. Buy or sell to the story of the day. Let's get in there. Colin Kaepernick's new Nike campaign, which is part of their 30th anniversary for Just Do It. How it's going over or how it's not going over, I mean, this is all a riddle. Who knows what to believe? Nike boycott was trending on Twitter over most of the last 24 hours. Some people wanted to tell you their stock price opened down 3 points, which it did. So did Adidas. So did Reebok a little bit. Dow was up and down, of course, because that's the way that works. The sock cutting thing is another thing altogether. I mean, what are we? Savages, people? Come on. Israel, how do you consider Nike doing this with Kaepernick and the cost-benefit analysis that must have gone into their decision?
I think it was an easy decision. I think if you look at it 10, 20 years down the road and look back, you're going to see that Nike was on the correct side of history here. They're going to be looked at as supporting and running a campaign in part with a player who did what? He wanted to rid this country of the social injustice, not just here, but around the world. So you're talking about a guy who was trying to do what the Constitution asked, to form a more perfect union. Nike becoming together with Colin Kaepernick there doesn't seem like a problem in the long term.
Frank Isola?
But here's the thing about that company. If you go over the years, there's been a lot of accusations about sweatshops, especially in Asia, with Nike employees and low wages and things of that nature. I wonder if Colin Kaepernick will address that if he ever does speak. But you know what? Look at the timing of it. It comes out the week of the start of the NFL season. I believe that they feel they can tap into a market and make money off of it. And I'll tell you what. I think they're praying, crossing their fingers, that the president comes out and tweets something about Nike and Kaepernick. I think that's part of their marketing.
So you think part of this is any PR is good PR, even if it comes?
That's how I think.
All right. And one other question for you, Frank. Do you believe that boycott is real? The boycott that you see trending out there, the people setting their shoes and their lawn on fire. Do you believe that's real?
I definitely think there's going to be a segment of people that's going to look at that word sacrifice and it's going to turn them up because he's getting paid for that ad. He did have a job at one point. He didn't really want to play for Baltimore. So I think the wording of that is going to turn off a lot of people.
All right, Jackie, then I'll ask the same question for you. Nike's cost-benefit analysis, but also maybe considering the radical action that Kaepernick's been about for change, repurposed for what some people might say materialism or capitalism.
So I think a little bit of that is going to happen, but I think like so many, our attention span is so short that that'll come and go, and maybe people will boycott Nike for a couple of months until they see a pair of kicks they really want for Christmas, and then they start buying this Nike socks at Marshall's for all their kids, for their stockings. That's just how American capitalism works as far as I'm concerned. I like that Nike did this. They like to be edgy. I think Israel's right. They have a long view. But in the short term, everybody's talking about it, and that's always good for business, and it's good for their athletes as well.
Long after this ad goes away, we'll remember Kaepernick as part of the history of the NFL, an important part, if you will. I think that this is more about capitalism than it is about philosophy, and he's not the only face of Nike. There are 6 other prominent athletes that are featured in these commercials, so let's don't, misplace where our importance is.
There are 4 prominent sports writers right here, but we're not talking about Woody Page and Israel Gutierrez in Showdown. We're talking about Frank Isola and Jackie McMullen. We'll be back in 2 minutes. And McMullen, good luck in Showdown. Jacob deGrom for your consideration, NL Cy Young. Frank, do you trust baseball writers who are voters will be evolved enough to give a Cy Young to a starter who currently has an 8-8 record?
They're going to look beyond the record. They're going to look at that ERA and the numbers that he's putting up, rank right up there with what Tom Seaver had done, Doc Gooden, former Cy Young winners. They will vote him Cy Young.
I think they may, Frank. 25 straight starts with 3 runs or fewer. The only other guy that did that was around in 1910.
Ugh.
I wish I could tell you his name, but it escapes me at this exact moment.
And he gets no run support.
Never.
He pitches.
Well, that's
you
obvious,
walked us
right?
all the way there, but you wish you could tell his name. If you had his name, you'd get the point. For now, we'll move on. Showdown 2.
Can't argue.
All right, dunking chicken fingers into your soda. Fair or foul, Jackie? See if you could answer that for us.
Okay, first of all, foul to eat chicken fingers. Very, very foul to dip it into the drink. And then what? You're going to drink it later? Oh, my gosh, this whole thing makes me want to just vomit.
This was a Seinfeld episode, and she took her nephews to the tennis match. She was showing them what she used to do when she was a young kid. You have to stop doing that once you reach a certain age, though. Chicken fingers and soda?
Especially when the camera's on.
That's a brutal combination.
Frank, you had the King Cole. You are our King Cole. Unforgettable today. 30 seconds.
Glad to be back. Well, maybe you didn't hear this, but summer is over. But not in New York, where it has been brutally hot. And if you look at what's going on at the U.S. Open, Roger Federer last night, Sloane Stephens, the defending champ, today, melting in the sun. Now, you could say, they're tennis players, toughen up a little bit. But they built this tennis stadium with this roof over it. Why not close the roof on days like today so everybody doesn't have to melt? They took up all that land over by Citi Field that they could use to build a soccer stadium, and all they keep doing is building onto that tennis center where they play 2 weeks a year.
Right.
Close the roof.
It always comes back to soccer.
Unbelievable, Frank.
17 more days of summer, Frank.
That's going to do it, folks. Thanks for coming around. We're on a 43.5-hour break.
Hang in there,
Tomorrow on
Frank.
the Horde.
Just don't wear white, Frank. After Labor Day.